On Daf Mem Hey and Beis, about 7 lines, 8 lines before the end of the Amud, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lulav Shiva. Lulav should be recited a bracha on the lulav all 7 days. The Succah Yomech, but in the case of Succah, we make a bracha only on the first day, and that bracha carries you over for all 7 days. My timer. What's the difference between a lulav that requires a separate bracha on each day, and Succah, one bracha suffices for the entire holiday? Lulav, the mifseke leilos miyam. Every single day of lulav is separated from the previous day by lila, because the mitzvah of lulav, as we've learned in the past, only applies by day and not by night. And therefore, we apply the principle kol yoma mitzvah b'yapei nafshe. Every single day generates its own new mitzvah. So what I fulfilled yesterday has nothing to do with what I fulfilled today. And I recite the bracha shekitzonu mitzvos kitzonu every day because it's a new mitzvah that emerges with the new day. And the lila of the previous night before this day separates yesterday from today. But Sukkah conscious, lo risike leilos yamin. It's one continuous mitzvah that begins on the first night of Teshuvah, but continues for 7 days without any break whatsoever. And therefore, if it's one continuous mitzvah, then one bracha will suffice for all 7 days. In a sense, it's similar to tefillin, where one bracha in the morning will suffice for the entire day. I don't have to recite the bracha again and again and again. But yet, the next day, I have a new chiyuv because we pass in Laila Lavsman tefillin, and therefore the Laila is mafsik between yesterday and today requires a new bracha, but that bracha will cover me for the entire day. What's unique about Sukkah is that 7 days of Sukkah are considered like one day because they all integrate into one continuous mitzvah. Kulu shiva kechad yoma arichta dam. All 7 days collapse into one day. Again, physically, sunrise, sunset, the stars come out, it's 7 different days. Halachically, it's one day. One continuous day, meaning one continuous machayev with one kiyum of 7 days. One bracha will suffice for all 7 days. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Omar Shmuel. However, Rabbi Bar Chana Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, at this point, we're shifting from Shmuel to Rabbi Yochanan, and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan very often argue one against the other. We usually cast like Rabbi Yochanan against Shmuel, but in this case, we have 2 different versions of Rabbi Yochanan. Both of these 2 versions came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Rabbi Yochanan was in Eretz Yisrael, and his Torah was transmitted to Bavel by a few very famous Talmidim of his. One of them was Ravin, the other was Rabbi Bar Chana. There were others, Rav Dibi and others. And Rabbi Bar Chana, according to his version, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Sukkah Shiva, just the opposite of Shmuel. Every day of Sukkah generates its own new mitzvah. And when I wake up in the morning and I go into the Sukkah, I have to make a new bracha. But Lulav, Yom Echad. Lulav gets only one bracha whenever I get a chance to make the bracha. So Rashi interprets that Lulav gets 1 day of bracha because according to Rabba's version of Rabbi Yochanan, we'll soon see a different version of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan maintains that on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, we do not make a bracha. So we can make a bracha every day of Sukkot because every day of Sukkot is part of the mitzvah of Sukkot Teishvu, and it's a Doraisa mitzvah. But in the case of Lulav, we can only make a bracha on the first day of Sukkot because by Yom HaRishon, only on the first day is there a mitzvah Doraisa. And this really has to do with a fundamental issue about a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan what we call a Gavra mitzvah? The Torah says, Lo Tosur, don't deviate from the Rabbanan. Or can the Rabbanan create a new mitzvah with a new Maaseh mitzvah and a new Kiyama mitzvah, and that generates a bracha? But according to this version of Rabbi Yochanan, we'd have no bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Lulav d'Rabbanan, Sagile b'chad yom. The Gemara's language is a little bit ambiguous here. Sagile. as if to say it's enough that you give one bracha, you recite one, but no, it means more than that. It means stagile, because the other days of lulav were instituted by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai as a takanas chachamim. The Torah says b'yom harishon, and on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan we don't make a bracha. We're going to soon see the Gemara is going to quote the case of Hanukkah where we do make a bracha. But in any event, as far as Sukkah is concerned, Sukkah is d'oraisa all 7 days, and Rabbi Yochanan disagrees with Shmuel. Shmuel says one bracha suffices for all 7 days of Sukkah. It's one continuous day. It's one long day. But Rabbi Yochanan never accepted one long day. Every day is a new entity as far as the mitzvah of Sukkah. He also Ravin had a deviant version of Rabbi Yochanan. That Rabbi Yochanan accepts a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and just like every day with regard to Sukkot generates its own mitzvah and requires its own bracha. Yesterday's bracha is not going to help me for today. So too in Lulav, once the Rabbanan established a mitzvah d'Rabbanan for the 6 days, the balance of Sukkot, each day is a separate entity and generates its own bracha. So what's common to both Rabbah and Ravin in their interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan is that as far as Sukkah is concerned, every day requires its own bracha. The plukta here within Rabbi Yochanan revolves around Lulav. According to the first version, that's Rabbah's version, Lulav only gets 1 day of bracha because you don't make a bracha on a d'Rabbanan. According to Ravin's version of Rabbi Yochanan accepts that Lulav is a mitzvah d'Rabbanan that generates a bracha, because we do make a bracha on a d'Rabbanan, and Lulav, like Sukkah, every day is a separate machayev and requires its own bracha. Amar Rav Yochanan, Amar Rav Yosai, the code de Rabba bar Bachana b'yodcha. We should accept the view of Rabba bar Bachana in Rav Yochanan, which means that we do not make a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Because since everybody agrees, at least as far as Sukkah is concerned, that every day requires its own bracha, then we've already accepted part of Rabba bar Bachana. Let's accept Rabba bar Bachana hook, line, and sinker. And since both Ravin and Rabba bar Bachana agree that Alibid Rabbi Yochanan, every day of Sukkot requires its own bracha, therefore we accept that. However, as far as Lulav is concerned, we have machlokes about Rabbi Yochanan. Does Lulav as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, the balance of Sukkot, 6 days, require a bracha or not? Meisvei, and now we start today's daf, which is Memvav. Otse Lulav li'atzmo. When a person puts together the Daled Minim, that's called an asiyah. That itself is a mitzvah. And a mitzvah that comes very rarely from time to time requires a bracha shechiyanu, thanking God for bringing us to this day. Baruch shechiyanu v'kimanu v'gyanu l'zman. So later on, maybe we'll have a chance to discuss why we don't make that bracha when we put together the Daled Minim. But according to the Brisa, this is indeed the halacha of recite shechiyanu immediately upon putting together the Daled Minim, because it's a mitzvah to put together the Daled Minim. And this premise reminds us of a very fundamental issue about whether lulav tzarech eged or ein tzarech eged. In fact, according to the Mandiora, that lulav tzarech eged, which was Rabbi Yehuda deriving it from Ankudas Ezov, if you recall, the act of putting it together generates a psul of tasev v'lomena osli. So we see that putting together the lulav is an asiyah, at least according to one theory. Not lo lotzeisbo, when he's ready to fulfill the mitzvah. So it could be he put the lulav together on the 14th of Tishrei, but on the 15th in the morning when he takes the lulav to the Yotzei's mitzvah, Omer Baruch, etc., K'chon Tzosem Tzipanu al Netilas Lulav. And the Rambam has a discussion at the end of Hilchos Brachos as to why the bracha is al Netilas Lulav. We should be making a bracha litol es halulav. Why al Netilas Lulav? And the Rambam has a theory that since with the Agbei Nofik, the very second moment he picked it up, he was already Yotzei, So his bracha is not what's called over lasios. So the labid indicates over lasios, before the mitzvah. The al indicates on what's coming afterwards, the final kiyum ha-mitzvah. Correct. Why? Because there's one long mitzvah of lulav that begins with what? With ha'oseh lulav, with the asiyah of the lulav. It culminates with the kiyum of the tilas lulav, but the tilas lulav is only a continuation of the mitzvah that I begun. So the Shechiyanu now is chal on the entirety of the mitzvah, which includes both asiyah and the tila. The afal pisha birach olav yom rishon chozim var kol shiva. The Brisa clearly supports the second version of Rabbi Yochanan, that even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, that was Rabin, requires a bracha. The afal pisha birach olav yom rishon. So he already made the bracha on the Doraisa mitzvah, kakan l'chem yom rishon. Nevertheless, he will make the bracha every single day on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. The Brisa continues now as far as Sukkah. Sukkah for sure has a mitzvah asiyah. It doesn't begin with yeshiva. The Torah says tassel. And nobody disagrees that the psul of tassel v'lomina asiyah applies to Sukkah. So there's a mitzvah of asiyah. Today, very few people really, well, at least, I don't know today, but let's say in Flatbush, when I was growing up, very few people built their own sukkah. You used to have a sukkah of the shul. Everybody sat in the sukkah. Now, the mitzvah of building a sukkah only applies to your own personal sukkah. Ha'osa sukkah li atzmo, his own sukkah. Omer, he makes the bracha shadbar shachiyonu because that's the beginning of the mitzvah of sukkahs. Nifnas leicheba, he's not going to make shachiyonu. He's already made the shachiyonu on the asiyah. Omer, he makes the bracha kichanu tzosov tzivanu leishev pasuk. And now we use the classic lavid in the Succah bracha leishev pasuk because we're not talking about mida'ag be'nafik be as we did in the case of lulav. The kevan shabirach yom rishon, however, according to this Brisa, once he makes the bracha on the sukkah on the first day, shuv eino mevarech. So this Brisa support the sheet of Shmuel. Do you remember that in Rabbi Yochanan, nobody disagreed. Everybody agreed that according to Rabbi Yochanan, every day of Sukkot requires its own bracha. But it was Shmuel who maintained that one bracha covers you for the entire holiday of Sukkot. And that's reflected here in this Brisa. So the Gemara immediately asks, Kasha lulav halulav, Kasha sukkah sukkah. This Brisa certainly contradicts Rabbi Yochanan in terms of Sukkah, that's for sure, because every single version that we have of Rabbi Yochanan requires a bracha on Sukkah every single day. And as far as Lulav is concerned, this Brisa that requires a bracha every single day, second Choser Var Kol Shiva, that Brisa will support Ravin's interpretation of Rabbi Yochanan, but will contradict Rabbi Bar Chana because Rabbi Bar Chana says that you don't make a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, and here the Brisa says Chozim Var Kol Shiva. So the Gemara says Bishleim lulav al lulav lo kasha. You want to know whether lulav is a mitzvah d'oraisa or not? It could be this Brisa maintains that lulav is a mitzvah d'oraisa all 7 days. How could that be? Bisman. And the Torah says, with regard to the Beis HaMikdash. So mitzvah, lulav, in Mikdash is doraisa for 7 days. But Kan, if you're talking about Rabbi Yochanan, and according to Rabbi Bar Chana, Rabbi Yochanan does not have a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, is Bizman she'ein Beis HaMikdash Kayam, in which case the entire enterprise of lulav kol shiva is a takana Rabbi Yochanan Zakai, and we don't make a bracha on a d'Rabbanan, el sukkah, the sukkah kash. Here the Brisa says that one bracha suffices for all 7 days of Sukkot. That certainly supports Shmuel and contradicts Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara answers Tanoi, the issue as to whether or not one bracha could carry you for the entire mitzvah, which in this case includes all 7 days, is in fact a machlokas Tanoim regarding tefillin. The Sanya, tefillin, according to Rebbe, and we're very familiar with Rebbe's psak because this is how we pass it, Calls mancha v'nichan, anytime puts it on, mevarech alim, makes a bracha on it. So a person puts on tefillin, then he goes to the bathroom, takes off his tefillin, comes back, he makes a new bracha on his tefillin. That's Rebbe Shit. Chachamim omrim, eino mevarech al shabbos. All of his levisha of the same day is generated and integrated into one single chiyuv, one single mitzvah. So it doesn't matter how many times he puts on his tefillin, takes off his tefillin, what he did in the middle, he went to work and this and that. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is the day. The day is machayev as one integral mitzvah. And by analogy, the chachamim of this brisa would support the previous brisa that in the case of Sukkah, one bracha will suffice for all 7 days. Because just like the Rabbanan take the entire day of tefillin and integrate it into one indivisible whole, such that one bracha will cover you and relate to the entire day of tefillin, so too in Sukkah, all 7 days are considered one Yom HaRichta, because the Machayev is 7 days. Whereas Rebbe, who holds that every time you take off your tefillin, you have to make another bracha when you put it on, even on the same day. And in Sukkah, every time you walk out of the Sukkah, and let's say you have to go and take care of your needs, you come back into the Sukkah and you make a new bracha.
Why?
Correct. It's like a hesed hadas. It's a hefsek. And it's a new Maisa mitzvah with a new kiyum, and you make a new bracha. Itmar, we learned Abai Omer Hilchos Sukkah Rebbe, Rav Omer Hilchos Sukkah Rabbanan. Now you know that we always passing like Rava against Abai, which means if Rava is passing like the Rabbanan, then as many times as you put on your tefillin in one day, one bracha covers you for all. That's not our meaning. But for that, we have to see the next few lines in the Gemara. Amar Rav Mori, Bra Devas Shmuel. Chazina Leila Rava. I saw Rava, the lo Ovid Kishmaita, that every time he took off his tefillin and he put it on again, he would make a new bracha. Which means that Rava must have rescinded his original position. Ella, what did Rava do? Maktim v'koi. He made a bracha before he started his day of tefillin, meaning for the first time he put on tefillin. And then the oil of Beis HaKisei, when he went into the latrine, into the bathroom, Nafik, he came out of the bathroom, Nashi, Mashe Yode, he would wash his hands, Umeniach tefillin u'mevarech. A very strange language. It should have said mevarech umeniach tefillin. But the Gemara wants to emphasize that because he was putting his tefillin on again, he needed a bracha. And if again he had to go to the bathroom, once again he would make a bracha when he put on tefillin again. So we see clearly that Rava changed his mind and accepted the opinion of Abaye, very rare, and we pass like Rebbe, both in tefillin and in Sukkah. And because of this Gemara, both in tefillin, every time we take off that tefillin, put it on again, we make a new bracha, and in Sukkah, every time we leave the Sukkah and we go back in again, we make a new bracha. Anonymous to Rebbe Avdina, the Gemara makes a statement, a general anonymous statement that we also have accepted Rebbe, umevarchim kol shiva, and we don't view all the 7 days as one continuous mitzvah. Now, there's a very strange Rashi. I'm not going to tell you I really understand the Rashi, but I just want to point out the Rashi. It's about 15 lines, 12 lines down from the top. It says, and Rashi adds the following sentence. See, I would have said, without Rashi, that every day is a separate mitzvah, according to our minhag. And every day requires its own mitzvah, its own bracha. But Rashi says no, it's all kechad yom. So according to Rashi, it seems that the day is irrelevant. All that's relevant is if you left the sukkah, you didn't leave the sukkah. And then afkamina is, if I understand Rashi correctly, again, don't pass it. It's just Berzon talking out of his hat. Then I would think that according to Rashi, if I slept in the sukkah, when I wake up in the morning, I don't make a new bracha. Because Rashi is holding that kol, that kol shivas yomim kechad yom. It's all one day. It all depends upon whether I left the sukkah or I didn't leave the sukkah. Anyway, that's what it appears to me. That's not for a daf yomi shul, but anyway. Amar Mazutra, Chazina Leila Rav Papa, to Kol Emes Emanat Tefillin Mevarech. I can testify by Rav Papa every time he put on his tefillin again. He made a new bracha, Rabbanan Debei Rav Ashi, Kol Emes Demimash Meshebehu Mevarech. This is amazing. The Gemara in Masechet Yoma Daf Zayin establishes that just like the tzitz that was worn on the flight of the Kohen Gadol requires absolute focus without any hesech hadas. And hesech hadas, if he's distracted from the tzitz, he has to constantly be aware of the tzitz on his flight. So to tefillin, shel rosh, is like the tzitz. And therefore, you're obligated within the context of the mitzvah of kedushas tefillin, in the case of shel rosh, which is like the tzitz, to constantly be aware of your tefillin. And every time you touch your tefillin, that's a new kiyum, a new mitzvah unto itself, and you make a bracha. And guess what? No one seems to reject this. I've never seen anyone make a bracha on mishmush with tefillin. This Gemara somehow fell into oblivion, into disuse. And the only thing I could say is that maybe we don't know exactly what the Gemara has in mind. What do you mean every time he touched the tefillin? Let's say he touched the tefillin once and then he made a bracha, touched it again and again and again. There must have been some hefsek in which either his tefillin moved a little bit or for some reason on a periodic basis he would have to check his tefillin to make sure that he's aware of his tefillin, etc. We don't have those shiurim. We don't know. We have no clue exactly when mishmush with tefillin is mechayev.
Right. This is the kind of one chayev. Tefillin kol shah. Touches tefillin every hour.
He has to make sure his tefillin, he's aware of his tefillin, he has to touch his tefillin.
More than tefillin all day.
And they would have to do a mashmesh, and every time they made a new bracha according to Rabbanan Debei Rav Ashi. And I just pointed out that this halacha has fallen away. We don't have this halacha. There's no one that I know of. Again, I've davened with the Sfaradim, I davened with Succah, I davened with the Ashkenazim, and so forth and so on. With my Shperel, I mean, he took me to the real McCoy, Bavav and bells and visions of minyan. I didn't see anyone making a bracha on mishpush b'tefillin. And yet no one disagrees with this. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, mitzvahs lulav kol shiva. Every day requires its own bracha. And clearly, Shmuel is of the opinion that we recite a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, right? Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon Levi Omar, Yom Rishon mitzvah lulav, mikan v'elech mitzvah sikenim. Now Rashi learns mikan v'elech mitzvah sikenim. Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai v'sei Yosef. U'drabbanan lo boy bracha. That's the language of Rashi. Again, I don't have time to read it inside. You'll find it. It's 15 lines down from the top. And Rashi understands that according to Rabbi Shimon Levi, the balance of the lulav doesn't require bracha. It's d'Rabbanan, like we saw Rabbi Yochanan according to the first version of Rabbi Yochanan of Rabbi. But the truth is, I'll be honest with you, if not for Rashi, I would have interpreted this Gemara totally differently. I would have said that Rabbi Shimon Levi has a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, but the nusach habracha doesn't mention the mitzvah, but rather shekutzanim mitzvah also the tzivana the mitzvah is a kenim. God, you have commanded us to oblige and fulfill the obligations that were established and acted by the Chacham. But Rashi doesn't learn that. So I'm just telling you that he doesn't like birds on today. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak Omar, Kol Yova mitzvah skenim va'afilu yom rishon. This doesn't make any sense. The Gemara is going to have to rewrite the script over here because Rabbi Yitzchak is saying that even the first day of Lulav is not Doraisa. So the Gemara says, va'kaimol and yom rishon Doraisa. Ema, you have to rewrite Rabbi Yitzchak, rewrite the script, bar miyom rishon. In other words, every day is the Rabbanan, with the exception of Yom Rishon, which is Doraisa. Hachi Hainu Rabbi Shimon Levi. Then he's basically repeating exactly what Rabbi Shimon Levi had just formulated, that the balance of Sukkot is only mitzvahs zekanim. Ema v'chein om Rabbi. So rewrite the text. Rabbi Yitzchak is simply agreeing with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Afrav Sava called Shiva mitzvahs lulav. Every day requires its own bracha. The Yom Rab Chia Bar Ashi Rav Hamadlik Nerech Shel Chanukah Tzarach Levorech. and it means that on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, we recite a bracha. Clearly, Ner Chanukah is only d'Rabbanan. And we therefore will make a bracha on every day of Lulav in the same way that we make a bracha on Ner Chanukah. And by the way, the Gemara could have quoted other mitzvahs like Megillah or Ner Shabbos. We make a bracha on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. That's how we paskin like this, Rav. And that's what we saw over and over and over again, to the exclusion of Rabbi Yochanan. There's a special bracha for seeing the Ner Chanukah. Now, if I lit my own Ner Chanukah, then immediately I see the Ner Chanukah, and this second bracha will be added to my first bracha. But if, let's say, I'm not lighting Ner Chanukah, I'm on a boat, or I don't have Neros, and I see your Ner Chanukah, I make a bracha for seeing your Ner Chanukah. My mevorech, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Yom Rishon Madlik, mevorech Shol. If you're lighting your own candle, you make 3 brachas. There's no mitzvah asiyah, like there was a shechianu on creating a lulav, creating a sukkah. There's no shechianu on creating a ner Chanukah. You could let your wife set up your ner Chanukah, your child, anyone can set up your ner Chanukah. But when you're ready to light, you make 3 brachas. But Haroah, if he's not lighting his own ner Chanukah, he's on a boat, then Mevarch Shtayim. He only makes 2 out of the 3 brachas. Mikan V'elach, from the second day of Chanukah and on, Madlik Mevarch Shtayim, V'roah Mevarech Achas. My Mevarech, Baruch Asher Kitshon Mitzvosam Tzivona Lahadlik Ner Shel Chanukah. Again, the nusach of brachas is always with a lamed lehad. The heichon tzivanu. How can you say asher kitshanu mitzvosav v'tzivanu on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan? Where did God command you in this mitzvah of Ner Chanukah? Aren't you lying when you say those words? And the Gemara offers 2 answers. According to the first answer, heichon tzivanu, mi lo sasu, should not deviate from the command of the Chachamim. From Nachbar Yitzchak, he has a different pasuk. Sha'al avicha v'yagedcha zkenecha v'yomu l'cha. So the first pasuk comes from our parsha that we read yesterday, and the second pasuk comes from a later part of yesterday's reading at the end of the parsha. The first pasuk is a losas. Do not deviate from the Chacham. The second pasuk is a mitzvahs aseh. Now, in the Masechet, he has a whole explanation as to what this machlokus is all about. Why quote 2 different psukim? And he quotes the Ramban in his Hasagas on the Sefer HaMitzvahs. Tama machlokus. According to the first opinion, which is actually the opinion of Rabbi Avia, mitzvahs ner Chanukah should be derived from los sosur, and Lomai kol mitzvahs shechidshu chachamim harehem gzeros usyag. Fascinating. According to this first opinion, even a mitzvah, like Ner Chanukah, is nothing more than a siyag and a gzera, and therefore comes under lo sos. From Nachbar Yitzchak Lomad, she mitzvos shechidshu chachamim eino bechlal lo sos. Lo sos gives the power and the authority of the Chacham to make Gzeros and Siyagim. This is not a Gzeros Siyag, this is a mitzvah. And therefore they can only be included in the Pasuk Sha'al Avicha V'yagedcha. Very fascinating machlokas here, which requires at least an hour shir. Then the Gemara says Zman. He will recite Zman, Shechiona V'Gimel. And then we reduce the number of brachas on the second day from 3 down to 2. And what are we leaving out? We're leaving out Zman. So the Gemara asks, Emo Memaidnes. Maybe we should leave out the bracha Asher Asa Nisim Lavosenu on the second day, and etc. No, Nes Kol Yoma is. We had a Pach Shem that could only last for 1 day, and it lasts second day, third day. Every day is a new miracle. So certainly we need a bracha on the new miracle of that day. However, Shechiyanim is on a brand new mitzvah. We only have this mitzvah of Ner Chanukah once every day is again the repetition of that same mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, and therefore Zman is only the first time I fulfilled. Now, if I don't have a Ner Chanukah on the first night, I will recite Shechianu on the second night, or whenever I get my act together. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Masni Lebeheja, he has an explicit brisa with regard to Rav's opinion, regard to lulav. In other words, we thought that we were quoting it and deriving it as a conclusion from Rav, but no, I have it directly. I'm a Rav, Kol Shiva Mitzvahs. So it's not indirect, but it's direct. Okay, fine. Tana Rabbanu, we learned to the brisa. O says Sukkah. Liatzmo Merbach Shechianu Nichnas Leishik Merbach Shechianu Mitzoso Hoisa Asuya Vomedes. If he already has a sukkah that was built, can he make the bracha Shechianu? If he could change the schach or the defanos in such a way that it became possible, and now he makes it kosher again, then Yachol Avarach, he could make the bracha of Shechianu V'Kimanu, because now he has a brand new asiyah. And it seems like the Gemara is actually advocating that he do this in Lav, but if he's not able to change the sukkah, then we don't give up on the mitzvah of Birchas Shechianu. We fulfill the brach of Shechianu, but not on the Asiyah, because he cannot be Machadish Batom. But he'll now attach the Shechianu to the first opportune moment that he gets to sit in the sukkah. Omar Avashi, Chazina Leila Rav Kahana, to call Omar Lahu Lakulu, Akasa Likidusha. Rav Kahana advocated forgetting about making a brach of Shechianu when you build the sukkah. Not a good idea. Let's wait and organize all the brachas over Kiddush when we enter into the sukkah on the first night. We're going to recite 3 brachas. We're going to recite the bracha on the sukkah. We'll recite the Kiddush, and we'll recite Shechianu. And that Shechianu will cover me for the sukkah and also for the building of the sukkah. And this is our minhag. And the Mefarshim explain, why do we drop the ball on the earlier minhag of the brisa, namely that when we build the sukkah, we make the bracha. And they say that at the time that the halacha was paskin, let's say 5 centuries, it was quite common that they all would sit in one communal sukkah. They didn't have their own sukkah. So that's why they decided to push off the bracha of Shechianu until the night, even for someone who builds his own sukkah. Rashi, what's mitzvahs harve? Rashi says, where is it? Sorry, give me a second.
10 lines up.
From the bottom.
No, but 5.
5 lines up from the bottom. Mitzvahs harve. Lito lulav, leishev b'sukkah, laniach tefillin, l'satech b'tzitzis. He has all these mitzvahs in front of him. He's Omer, according to the first opinion of the Tanakh of this price, Baruch Asher Kitonu Tzimono Al HaMitzvahs. He integrates all these different separate mitzvahs into one. Now, you know the old time IQ tests, where they would show you 4 things and they would ask you which one is out of place? You know, they had 3 fruits and 1 animal or something. Which one of the 4 is out of place? We don't wear tefillin. And those who wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed, these are the real Hesa, the hot Nusach Ashkenaz guys. Yeah, the Ramah guys. The Ramah Paskins that you wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed. There's no way that Rashi could be referring to tefillin and sukkah unless he's talking about Chol Hamoed, and means that Rashi held that you wear tefillin on Chol Hamoed, which is a pella. If you see anyone here in Eretz Yisrael wearing tefillin on Chol Hamoed, just wrap it around his neck. Nobody wears tefillin on Chol Hamoed here in Eretz Yisrael. But I was down in Florida, in the Young Israel, in North Miami Beach, and no one is allowed to daven for the Amud during Chol Hamoed unless he's wearing tefillin. Ella. But Rashi seems to support that opinion. I just wanted to point that out to you, even though we're learning it Daf Yomi. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mevarach al kol achas v'achas b'tnei atzma. Every bracha is a separate entity, requires its own bracha. Omer Rav Zera v'itein Rav Chanina Bar Papa Hilchos Sukkah Rabbi Yehuda. We pass like Rabbi Yehuda. What's the source for Rabbi Yehuda? Omar Rav Zera Rav Item Rav Chanina Bar Papa. My time of the Rabbi Yehuda. The Siv, we have a puzzle in Tehillim, if I'm not mistaken. Baruch Hashem Yom Yom. What's the double language? Yom Yom. Bless God every day, every day. By Yom and what does it mean beyond beyond? I mean, it sounds like only during the day and not at night. It makes no sense. We make brachos at night as well. So the Gemara answers, of every day that has an endowment of a special Kiddush Sayom should deserve its own bracha. So we have a special bracha for Mekadesh at Shabbos and a special bracha for Mekadesh Yisrael V'yom HaSukkah, etc., or Moadim, I should say. Is Nami, let's make an equation that just like every day that's sanctified and has a unique status, independent, requires its own bracha, is b'chol dor v'dor tein lo mein brachos. Every mitzvah has an independent status with its own kiyum and requires its own bracha. V'yom Rav Zera v'Item Rav Chanina Bar Papa. Bo ure'ei shalo k'midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'midas pasuk. This is a classical case where the Talmud has a certain chain of Mesorah, and once we mention that chain in a halachic sense, we jump over to Agadita. Let's contrast God, lahavdil, with Basba. Me, that's Basba, I'm a human being. Kli Rekon. Now we're going to begin. Just 1 second, sorry.